Déjà respectée par une large communauté de joueurs, la série des Castlevania a su séduire encore plus de monde grâce à sa récente tentative de reboot sur console HD, Lords of Shadow, qui à l'heure actuelle reste le plus grand succès commercial de la saga. Aujourd'hui, c'est sur 3DS, sous la forme d'une expérience en 2D, que la série Lords of Shadow revient. Baptisé Mirror of Fate, cet épisode se doit de répondre aux attentes de joueurs aux profils très différents. Il doit dans un premier temps satisfaire les nouveaux venus qui attendent une suite à Lords of Shadow, mais également convaincre ceux qui gardent un excellent souvenir des Castlevania en 2D et des travaux de Igarashi Sensei, comme Symphony of the Night par exemple. Et c'est à l'occasion d'une entrevue avec le producteur de la série, Dave Cox, que nous avons pu poser quelques questions, notamment concernant cette difficulté à séduire ces différents types de joueurs.
I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to meet the expectations of the people that bought Castlevania Lords of Shadow. That game, when it came out, was the most successful Castlevania that's ever been released in the series history. So what we've done is we've brought in a lot of new fans into the Castlevania mythology. So our number one goal is to please those people, is to say to those people, here's a sequel to your game, the game that you really loved. At the same time, you know, we want to keep one foot in the past. We want to give the game that kind of classic feeling, and we want to give players you know, who've grown up with the Castlevania mythology, we want to give them a feeling this feels like a classic game. And I think Mirror of Fate is a much closer marriage between the new and the old. So I think that older fans will appreciate it because, you know, it's got a lot of aspects. It feels like a classic game. It feels like almost a spiritual successor to Dracula's Curse, which is one of my favourite games. You know, we have the multiple characters of that game. We have the multiple exploration elements of that game. You know, in many ways, we wanted to create a sequel to that game. Although this isn't a sequel, a true sequel, there are many aspects of this game that have in common with Dracula's Curse. So I hope that the old fans will get into this because you know, I think they understand now that what we're trying to do with this series is do something that's outside of the Castlevania timeline, and they can accept it, that it's a reimagining. They can, you know, hopefully be open to that. But primarily, it's a sequel to Castlevania Lords of Shadow. So I think if you enjoyed that game, you know, when you get this game, you're going to feel like, hey, this is a worthy sequel to that game. That's the biggest challenge of you know, modernising Castlevania is keeping the identity, the atmosphere, the kind of core things about the series that people really remember and like, but also, you know, keeping it fresh and new and changing it without completely changing it. You know, sometimes you're really successful at that, sometimes it feels like a perfect marriage, and sometimes, you know, you're not so successful. I think with we learned some lessons with Lords of Shadow for sure. And I think with Mirror of Fate and Lords of Shadow 2, those lessons will become evident, you know, when people see the game. You know, I think it will be a lot more, there are stronger titles than Lords of Shadow for us, for sure. Our goal with the Lords of Shadow series was to modernise Castlevania, to bring it to a wider audience. You know, previously it kind of been appealing to a hardcore fan base, you know, who are very passionate about Castlevania, just as I am. But the Konami, you know, senior management felt that you know, they wanted Castlevania to reach a bigger audience, so that we could pull in new players. And one thing that really that makes me happy about Castlevania Lords of Shadow is we get a lot of people writing to us and emailing us and tweeting us saying, this is the first Castlevania I ever played, and it made me want to play Symphony of the Night, it made me want to play Super Castlevania 4, and thank you for getting me into the Castlevania universe. So I think that's nice that people have been inspired by what we've done, because that's what happened to me. You know, I was inspired by the original Castlevania. You know, Super Castlevania 4 made me want to work at Konami. It made me send my CV to Konami and say, give me a job, you know, and hopefully that's going to inspire other people now.
Se lancer dans ce Castlevania 2D a forcé les équipes de Mercury Steam à revoir l'aspect exploration de leur série. En effet, de l'aveu même du producteur, cette dimension n'était pas vraiment mise en avant dans l'épisode précédent sur console HD, ou en tout cas, pas comme certains fans l'auraient souhaité. On peut alors se demander si ce Mirror of Fate propose autre chose en termes d'exploration, quelque chose qui se rapproche plus du style Metroidvania, ou alors si le développeur continue sur son principe d'exploration linéaire.
It's kind of a mixture of both. You know, we felt that the exploration aspect of Lords of Shadow wasn't as strong as it could have been. You know, when we talked about what we would do differently about Lords of Shadow, exploration was one of the things that we felt as a team we could improve. So when we came to the design of Mirror of Fate, we wanted to have a much deeper, much more improved exploration aspect. And what we've tried to do is take some of those Metroidvania elements and also as I mentioned before, the Dracula's Curse, multiple branching pathways. So players will be backtracking, players will be looking around the areas for hidden secrets, and you know, that kind of aspect of the gameplay that players really like from the classic games is definitely in this game. So, you know, you play through the game, it appears linear at first, but then it opens up, the castle opens up, and even when you've completed the game, you can go back and re-explore those areas in the castle to get everything 100%. And the really cool thing is when you finish the game and you do get 100%, there's a really nice unlockable that gives you a kind of clue about what's going to happen in Lords of Shadow 2. We had a lot of praise about certain things that we'd done with the game. The combat people really liked. The strategic element, mixing up light and shadow magic, people really liked that. People were disappointed with the exploration aspect. You know, they felt the game was quite linear. So that was something we really wanted to improve. We also felt that you know, with Lords of Shadow, because we'd you know, been so successful with that game, we felt that we had a mandate to continue forward, and we had a bit more confidence this time to incorporate some of those older classical elements from the Symphony, you know, from Symphony of the Night and from Dracula's Curse and Super Castlevania 4 to give the game more of a sort of a classic feel. So we felt a little bit empowered to take those kind of elements. So I think this game, for the fan base, when they look at it, they'll see that it's actually, you know, a lot closer to what they're expecting from a Castlevania title.
Un des points qui semblait mettre tout le monde d'accord sur Lords of Shadow, c'était son système de combat qui laissait le joueur enchaîner des combos un peu à la manière d'un God of War. Un système que Mercury Steam a essayé d'importer dans son Mirror of Fate, non sans difficulté, compte tenu de la nature 2D de son titre.
It was quite a challenge to bring that kind of 3D action combat scenario to a two-dimensional plane. You know, we're big fans of fighting games, the 2D side-scrolling fighting games and one-on-one fighting games like Street Fighter and things like that. We wanted to kind of capture a bit of that in it. So we wanted the players to feel like, you know, they were battling enemies and they were able to pull off combos when they wanted to. They were able to use their secondary weapons whenever they wanted to and mix that with their magic abilities. So it felt like a fighting game. So that's kind of how we approached it, you know, from a 2D perspective. At the same time, you know, we want to play with players' perceptions in terms of what they expect. So, you know, you see a side-scrolling 2D game, but in many ways this is a third-person action game as well, because the camera, you know, comes into the world quite a lot. You know, you see boss fights from very different perspectives. It's not always kind of flat on. So, you know, it feels modern. It feels, you know, it feels like something new, but at the same time, it feels classic as well. The other thing that we wanted to do in terms of was fighting mechanics was, you know, area attacks and direct attacks are kind of one of the core features of the Castlevania Lords of Shadow game. And, you know, the usability of that, being able to keep enemies at bay with area attacks, being able to dish direct damage to, you know, enemies one-on-one. We wanted to keep that aspect of it. So, you know, we've tried to tweak enemies so they come at you from different sides, and you can use your area attacks to keep them at bay, try to control the crowd whilst, you know, switching between direct attacks and area attacks. I think that strategy element of the combat that people really liked about the first game is still evident in Mirror of Fate. So hopefully, you know, when players play it, they'll be challenged with the combat, because I think that's important for this title.
Et les challenges à surmonter pour l'équipe ne se situaient pas uniquement au niveau du game system, mais aussi au niveau de la technique et de la capacité de Mercury Steam à proposer quelque chose de pointu visuellement parlant et d'inspiré en termes de direction artistique.
I think the hardest part was realizing the visual beauty of the first game and shrinking it down to 3DS size. You know, that was quite a challenge. We had to you know, build the game engine right from scratch for the 3DS, and we knew that we wanted to give it that kind of visual quality throughout the game, and so that we created all the assets in high definition so that we could shrink them down. You know, something very common in game development is to create high resolution, higher quality assets and pull them down. You know, we wanted stone to look like stone, we wanted wood to look like wood, armour, you know, we wanted the light to reflect on armour properly, and these are things that we felt were important with the first game, and doing that for the 3DS was really challenging. When we showed the game at E3, you know, we weren't happy with the quality that we showed at E3. We felt the lighting wasn't right. You know, the game had frame rate problems. The combat didn't feel solid. It didn't feel smooth. You know, there was a certain pressure on us to show the game at E3. Obviously, Nintendo felt this was a very important title. But after E3, we said, okay, we're going to delay the game and we're going to spend a bit more time finessing it and polishing it and making it, you know, fit what we've done with the first game. It's important that the quality of this game is AAA quality. It has to be. And you know, hopefully people, when they see the game on the 3DS, they'll see that the visual style, you know, the design, the art direction, all the things that people really liked about the first game, is absolutely there in the 3DS title. It's just smaller.
Prévu pour le 8 mars prochain sur 3DS, nous sommes définitivement nombreux à attendre ce Mirror of Fate. On espère trouver dans ce Castlevania des feelings familiers, mais on attend également de lui qu'il nous surprenne, et on vous invite à ne pas rater la diffusion de la critique prévue dans un 100% à venir.